Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, first I'd like to ask unanimous consent to put 3 letters in the record. One is from the governor of the state of Oregon expressing concerns about the potential implementation and concerns with the RPA. One is from myself listing many concerns about this, and the third is from the Oregon delegation, or for 6 members of the Oregon delegation also expressing concern. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Shirley, under Oregon law, Measure 49 requires local communities to compensate property owners for any portion of land taken. What's going to happen with that under this proposal, this proposed RPA?
Yeah, we are evaluating that, the Measure 49 issue at my office, and Measure 49 has an off-ramp for activities that reduce hazards, and so to the extent to which the RPAs reduce hazard, they would likely not be Measure 49.
Yeah, but the whole intent of this RPA is not hazards.
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
the problem.
That's where I was going next. But if the RPA does not directly relate to hazard reduction, then there could potentially be Measure 49 claims.
So large areas, as the mayor of Beaverton mentioned, I was just looking at more maps for Empire out in Cubits Bay, where there's been state and local investment for hopeful massive redevelopment. And those areas become unbuildable, then the state is potentially on the hook for those costs.
That is exactly why we want to work with FEMA to...
right, but FEMA's being forced to do this by NIMFs.
Well, FEMA and NIMFs, but yes, it's our intention not to create unbuildable lands to the maximum extent that we are able to do, but we do have that concern.
Right, but without flexibility, as we've heard many times from the administrator, that's going to be very hard to do.
It could be difficult. It's going to be a tough row to hoe.
Yes. Mr. Chairman, you also mentioned the takings issue. Do you want to?
Mr. Chair, Congressman DeFazio, yeah, that is should be a very great concern for local governments and the state, because it is part of Oregon state law, and is one of the examples of things that NIMF simply didn't ask about when they were doing this because of the lack of consultation with state or local governments. You asked an earlier question about the options that were available. One of the reasons that nothing has happened on the moratorium side, for example, is that Oregon statutes are very restrictive about when a local government can declare a development moratorium. Keeping NIMFs happy is not one of the provisions. So we simply cannot do that in Oregon. The Measure 49 issue, the land use issue, all of this adds up to exactly why we're very happy this issue is in front of this Congress. This needs to be resolved. This is causing, if it goes forward the way it's written, with the best intentions of FEMA and the state notwithstanding, it is going to cause tremendous damage, policy damage, financial damage, local governments, private sector, across the board. And as Mayor Carruthers indicated in her district, probably with very little impact on the actual species that is purported to be the basis for the regulation in the first place.
Right. I just want to go back to that again, Mayor. I mean, you went through a process that went on for how long?
Thank you, Congressman DeFazio. Well, let's see. Probably since 1990, frankly, when the environmental groups sued the government, sued FEMA and NFIP. We were not party to that suit. There was a settlement agreement between NFIP and Fish and Wildlife that resulted in these RPAs that we now are forced to enforce. But in the 15 years that it took for this suit to be finalized and the settlement to be reached, we had already been in the process of updating our comprehensive plan to protect endangered species. And frankly, everything that's in the RPAs was simply taken from our data and our regulations and repackaged and given back to us to enforce in a new way. So it literally resulted in no net value to the process, no net improvement in protection of endangered species that we already care very much about.
And I assume there was some cost associated with this?
There is cost, and frankly, I haven't added it up, but as I mentioned earlier, we have a huge growth management department, and we have essentially no growth in our county. We have property owners that have not been able to, that were not able to build. And it also, contributes to our issues with takings, as Mr. Chandler said as well. We have huge takings issues in our county, and we litigate against those. So it's been quite a burden on our residents.
And no net gain or
Improvement.
substantial change. That's just extraordinary. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, and I'd like to thank